It is officially week 5 in the NFL season. We had some pretty big injuries yet again in week 4, so it's time to dive in and see who you should be picking up or who you should be playing this week based on those. Also, some breakout candidates as well against some bad defenses. So let's get right into it and break this slate down.
Let's do it.
So we have Arizona here. They are taking on the Tennessee Titans in a home game. Marv had a bit of a breakout after those drop issues and things. Did hand a ball to the defense in that game, creating an interception for Kyler. Looked out of sync in the first half and then kind of put things together, scored a touchdown down the stretch of that one. Still clearly the second option in that offense. Trey McBride hasn't had like quite as nuclear of a fantasy season as you might have hoped, but still has looked great and is like the tight end one in fantasy going forward. You're not going to overthink things too much. Just needs one of those like super nuclear weeks over 100 yards, which we haven't seen quite yet. That seems to be the biggest takeaway on the pass catching side of things. If we look down here, though, at the rushing numbers, we obviously had Trey Benson now on the IR for them, which sucks. He played 37 snaps for them. DeMercado played 26. Mainly in that second half, he was on the field throughout their final 2 touchdown drives. He caught a couple passes, scored a touchdown. Seems to be the pass catching back. And then we have Michael Carter at the bottom there, played 4 snaps, who should see a pretty big role increase in terms of the rushing game. I think DeMercado probably stays mainly as a pass catcher used in third down situations and things like that. Probably will have a bigger role than he did last week, but I expect Michael Carter's snaps to jump up and have him get towards that Trey Benson carry number or something above that in a positive game script in this one. I think he could have 14 carries or so. That feels like a reliable number. Are you trusting Michael Carter to pick him up this week?
Yeah, I think that is probably the case. I do like. Well, at least I'm going to be taking a look at some DeMercado receiving props for this game, but I do agree that Michael Carter should see a lot bigger of a role than he did last week. DeMercado to an extent as well, but Michael Carter will probably see the biggest relative jump. I also think Trey McBride should have a really good week against this Titans defense. I maintained last week that like without James Conner, a bunch of the targets were going to get funneled to the middle, and I think that's even more so the case with Trey Benson being out. We should see, he already sees an enormous snap share. We should see him get even more targets this week. He got 7 last week. So, yeah, I think it should be a big boom week for Trey McBride. Interested to see what those prices are going to look like.
Agreed. I think with the game script of this one as well, the running back should stack up carries if you can find lines on that, or just their rushing yards with PS Pick'em. I'm sure both these guys will be up there, so keep an eye on those as the week goes on. But moving on to the Atlanta Falcons here, they're on bye, so don't need to touch on them too much. But last week, Drake London finally broke out, had that huge first read percentage, over 50%, which is as big as you're going to see in the NFL. Just a huge week for him. Kyle Pitts also found his way in the end zone, had a good week. But Drake London finally proved he was that guy. And if you used your second-round pick on him, you feel a lot better after week 4 than you did before. A bye week to kind of figure things out, and hopefully that role only grows or stays about the same. I mean, he's over 20 fantasy points. That's fantastic. So hopefully he can sustain that. Had a great week. That's about all we got there. The Ravens, obviously a very interesting case after Lamar news. Play the Texans, whose secondary has been fantastic the last year and a half or so. Not a great matchup for Cooper Rush in his first start with Baltimore or pass catchers, really. I feel like this game is going to be pretty gross. The Ravens defense is going to have to step it up a ton, which is tough given the injuries they just sustained to Matt Abuike, Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey, pretty much across the board. Roquan Smith on defense. So 4 of their better defenders all out for this one, which is not great. Still expect a pretty low-scoring game, probably. The Texans' offense just hasn't looked great, but I'm not trusting any of these pass catchers this week. Unless you're desperate, I would probably be going with other options. I think there's better upside swings you can take in this one, unless you have a differing opinion.
Yeah. I mean, without Lamar, it's like none of these first reads are really going to play
No.
into the game at all. If anything, like, I don't know, maybe what could be fun? Maybe like an Isaiah Likely, just like the bigger target for the backup QB on the field. He hasn't really seen much volume yet. Well, last week was his first week, but
Maybe
I don't
him
know.
and Mark.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that could be maybe your fun, like a get weird swing with this, but otherwise, I wouldn't touch these guys.
Yeah, it's a tough one to read. I think you should see a ton of Derrick Henry. That's probably the guy
Yeah.
that's going to get the most work. I don't know how much success he'll have because I think the Texans probably know that. Obviously, if we're keen on that, they're probably aware as well that the passing game is not going to have too much success. So you kind of bottle up the run, and you should have a lot of success in this game. So, moving on to the Buffalo Bills, who play the Patriots on Sunday Night Football this week. Should be at least have the potential for a pretty high-paced game. Patriots offense has looked good the last 2 weeks, especially this last week, put up over 30 against the Panthers. I think this game could be fun. Seems like in games where teams can keep it close against Buffalo, Josh Allen has huge weeks, and when they're kind of in a game script where they're up a ton, James Cook seems to be the guy that eats. James Cook is obviously a RB1 in fantasy right now. You're putting him in every week, no questions asked. As far as these pass catchers, this feels like a week where Keon Coleman could get back in the end zone or something in a game where they're going to have to throw the ball potentially a tad more. These pass catchers in general are just kind of hard to trust. Kincaid didn't really do much of anything, but then caught that one 20-plus yard touchdown, and that saved his week fantasy-wise, but don't feel great about him this week. Keon Coleman's probably the guy. You're obviously starting James Cook, and Jalen should have a massive week. Kind of a credit to Josh Allen that his receivers are hard to start in fantasy just because he's able to hit so many different targets. It's hard to really get a read on exactly who you should be trusting.
Yeah, I would agree. It's like they're going up against a pretty good defense this week, and they spread the ball so much. It's kind of hard to, take a firm stance on any one of these receivers or tight ends to have a big boom game. Obviously, James Cook has been running super true. And I think it's going to be one of those game scripts. Like the Bills are 8.5-point favorites. They should be playing from a lead, which means more rushing. We'll get to it when we talk about the Patriots, but could mean kind of a fun game for Drake May. Could mean a fun game for Drake May's receivers. But yeah, I like James Cook here. I think, despite the pretty good rushing defense.
Agreed. We move on to the Panthers here.
Taking on the Dolphins.
Yeah, the Dolphins, whose secondary has been pretty weak. That got padded this week by kind of some late Garrett Wilson garbage time targets and a touchdown there. He was able to get over 20 PPR fantasy points in the first half where he didn't really look all that involved. So you like that if you are a Tet owner in this one. That feels like a great chance against a secondary that struggled. Outside of that, the Dolphins' run D has been kind of impressive the last couple weeks. They gave up huge plays to James Cook earlier on in the season, but last week were able to do a decent job against Breece Hall. He still got some chunk plays, but it was more just that he was the only running back there with Braylon Allen getting injured. I expect the Panthers to attack through the air in this one primarily, and you're not really trusting anyone outside of Tet, but I think Tet's a guy you must start this week. He's a matchup that I really like. So I'm starting Tet. Everyone else can't trust him.
Yeah, I think Bryce Young could be a fun start this week too. If you're looking for a quarterback around that range, might be top of waivers or something, or he's your bench QB. But I think Bryce Young could have an above average week, exceed his fantasy projection. Could be realistically a fun stock buy on PredictionStrike.
Yeah, it's a fun one. I like that. I think if you're in a super flex league or something and you need a quarterback for a week as well, maybe if someone on bye, I think he's a guy you can go in and start pretty easily, feel good about.
Absolutely.
The Bears are on bye. Last week, though, did beat the Raiders. The offense looked good. You can kind of trust Roma Dunze as like a wide receiver 2, even on the plus side of that, like a really solid, good wide receiver 2 in your fantasy lineups.
Conversely, you're worried if you're a DJ Moore owner, probably by the way they're using him. I mean, he could get traded, which is probably your best case scenario as a Moore owner. But
100%. I think you're praying for for that, absolutely. I think it's probably a likely scenario as well. They're kind of slowly giving you more Luther Burden, who's going to take that role in the future. I think DJ Moore, I'd be shocked if he was on the team in week 1 next year. It's just a matter of whether they go through the entirety of the season with him or they kind of make a trade earlier on. You feel really good about this offense, though. Caleb's looked great. He's kind of solidified himself as a top 10 fantasy QB. Smallish sample size, but I've been impressed with him outside of week 1. And outside of that, Swift just wasn't really able to get a ton going. I believe he did find his way into the end zone, but just not a guy you feel great about. I don't think he's all that talented, but there's not any real competition there. So unless they trade for someone, he's going to be the guy for the foreseeable future. And just off of pure volume alone, you got to probably start him as a flex. But yeah, obviously I'm bye this week, so we'll see if any big changes are made. The Bengals here, about as gross of a last few weeks as you can find. It's hard to really have a ton of confidence in this team going forward. Taking on the Lions, too, whose defense has been really good. Elite run defense. Chase Brown has already looked bad, and I don't see this as a huge week where he's going to break out. Jamar has really struggled. T has really struggled during this kind of transition period with Jake Browning, which is not what you want to see.
And Browning is just like looking even worse than we imagined he would.
Exactly. I think people were pretty confident in him for a bit, being a at least solid backup quarterback, and he has played 2 of the harder defenses in the NFL, especially coming in on short notice and taking on the Vikings and the Broncos, 2 defenses that blitz a ton, give you a ton of different looks. It's hard to break down. So I think he'll have more success as the season goes on than he did against those 2 teams. That's just tough matchups. I think Jamar should get fed a ton in this one. He looked pretty disinterested as that game went on, and it almost looked like the Bengals just gave up, which was not at all what you wanted to see. But Lions run D is really good. Not really trusting a ton of Chase Brown. I think you're still starting both these pass catchers because you have to, but you don't feel as good, obviously, as you would with Burrow, and that's the understatement of the year. But I think Jamar should get force-fed early in this one just to keep him occupied and interested in this one. Otherwise, I think you might lose him, and he could just get kind of lethargic. So,
and it's like with T, you're basically just hoping for like a splash play, like a touchdown to get you your fantasy points, which isn't, I mean, the worst thing. Like there's a lot of receivers this year that are in that same situation, but I'd say I was like a little bit more hopeful of the Bengals pass catcher situation last week than I am this week.
For sure. Completely agree. As we move on to the Browns, who play the Vikings, I believe. Yeah, the Vikings. Obviously a great defense. It's a tough start for Dylan Gabriel. Just got announced as the week 5 starter, and you couldn't find a worse matchup for a young quarterback taking on a defense that's super complex. Judkins has been getting absolutely fed in every game he's played in basically the last 3 weeks, but weeks 3 and 4, he's looked great. Cedric Tillman, obviously the big news out of this one, is out for a while. And I think, as you can see in this read percentage, Isaiah Bond should get a huge bump in this offense in terms of first read percentage, targets, all that. I expect him to be a guy that you should be stashing in fantasy formats that are deeper leagues, I guess. If you're in like an 8-man league or 10-man league or something, you're probably not going to pick up Isaiah Bond. But deeper than that,
probably will too.
Yeah. Deeper than that, though, I think he's a guy that you could be looking at, and Fannin should have a big uptick in targets as well. He's a guy that, as they've proven, can operate out of the slot as a bigger target, and that could be helpful for a guy like Dylan Gabriel, who's just struggling to find guys open. Sometimes you're just going to have to loft it up to your biggest target and see what happens. And in a lot of cases, that could be Harold Fannin getting schemed open with some slot looks. Judy, you're probably not starting this week. I wouldn't start any of these guys. Maybe Fannin if you're looking for a flex and tight end premium or something like that in a deeper league. But outside of that, not super confident. Judkins going straight in your lineups. He's dominated, but yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't start anybody this week. This game's going to be like 13-10 probably. So
Yeah,
get ready for a
Vikings
snoozer.
offense has actually looked somewhat competent under Carson Wentz as well. They've at least put up points.
Browns defense is pretty good
sure.
though. Yeah,
For sure. The Cowboys, obviously coming off a pretty electric tie. They're taking on the Jets, whose run D has looked pretty bad. Devon Achane had his best week on the ground in this past one on Monday Night Football. And George Pickens seems to be solidifying himself as the guy. Jake Ferguson is obviously a tight end you're still going to be starting. He's been pretty much dominating targets as much as any tight end in the league, Trey McBride included. So you're throwing in George Pickens, you're throwing in Jake Ferguson. I feel really good about Javonte Williams this week. I think they should dominate the ground game. And that's probably my biggest takeaway. I thought Dak looked fantastic. So you feel pretty good if you're a pass catcher in any matchup because I think he's back to real form and he's going to be able to find guys regardless of the separation.
Yeah, I think Pickens basically at this point, what I agree with all your points, but what I would emphasize personally is that like Pickens is probably a must start each week going forward until CD comes back. Like he had a massive target share, obviously a massive fantasy week. Dak throws top 5 most deep balls in the league. So like even if it is sort of a splash plays game, that's always going to be there. He throws like 4.5 deep balls a game, and Pickens is always going to be that guy. So he's pretty safe to start like week over week, I would say.
Yeah, I completely agree. CD, seemingly not the worst injury in the world. I think he'll be out this week, and then I think there's a chance you see him in week 6 maybe. But
I thought it was 7.
yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of still up in the air, but he seems to be like pretty mobile. I mean, he's like jumping around on the sidelines and stuff. So it's not gonna be anything super crazy, but I would say at most, yeah, you'd see him in week 7 at the longest, which you feel pretty good about, all things considered. Taking a look at Denver here, was obviously impressed with their showing on Monday night, but the Bengals like completely gave up in that one. It was like sad to see Cortland Sutton kind of having a weird first read percentage. They targeted Troy Franklin a ton and Marvin Mims in this one, but Sutton was still able to have a ton of success. He was at around 19 fantasy points in full point, which you're going to take every day of the week. That's kind of been Cortland Sutton's MO the last year or so. He's just been Mr. Consistent in terms of fantasy. His floor is really high. And I think this target share and read percentage is probably just going to change every week. Taking on the Eagles this week, whoever gets Quinion in this matchup is not going to be in for a ton of success. He's their best boundary corner, but so I think you might see some Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims, those type of characters get involved. Eagles run D hasn't been quite as good as advertised, and the Broncos seem to find some things in the run game. Cincinnati is about as bad of a run D as you can find, so take that with a grain of salt. But RJ Harvey was able to get involved a ton in that game, caught a bunch of passes. J.K. Dobbins looked elite on the ground, over 100 yards. So I think the ground game could be potentially a focus here, or some of those secondary wideouts.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the secondary wideouts thing. I think that's kind of a theme here. I mean, Eagles have a pretty crushing run defense, but I do think that RJ Harvey note that you mentioned is going to be more and more of a theme as the season continues. We're probably going to see more RJ, even though J.K. Dobbins has also looked great and is still a startable player. I think even against the Eagles, but yeah, I would just second what you said and look towards those secondary receivers this game if you're looking for like some fun upside plays, because it's likely going to be Sutton that's manned this game.
Yep, I'm with you. Lions here, they're taking on the Bengals, as we talked about. Any guy who can run the ball on the Lions, I'm going to feel really good about this week. I think Jameer's lines are up close to 80 so far, and I think Monty should have a ton of success as well. It's kind of more the bruiser. He fits that J.K. Dobbins profile that we saw dominate last week. So I'm starting both these guys. Pass catchers should have success early on with how bad this defense is, but I don't love them as long term just because I think this one has some potential to get out of hand. But even so, Amon-Ra has been absolutely dominant. He has scored a touchdown or two, or he scored 2 touchdowns in each of the last 2 games. You feel great if you're an Amon-Ra owner based on that. And Laporta has kind of been the main down spot in this offense. He hasn't really found a way to pick it up fully. This could be a game where he's able to get open in the middle a little bit, but he just doesn't seem to be a huge part of their offense. They're not scheming targets for him or anything, which is fine, but I think that you'd like to have some more of those plays designed for him if you're a Laporta owner, obviously.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of room to be concerned if you're one of the people that drafted Sam Laporta this season. Again, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a dominant running performance from the Lions. I think of the two, though, I'm going to be more interested in these David Montgomery props for Pick'em on PredictionStrike, just because he had what was a pretty tough game against the Browns, which is obviously not a huge surprise, but I think it's a great bounce back week here, and we'll probably see a little bit of leeway from that last tougher game on the lines for Monty this week.
Agreed. I'm a big fan. I think his lines are around 40-ish right now, so
yeah, I like that
it'll
a
be
lot.
A smash. You'll probably be seeing that on a Pick'em video coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
What you got for the Packers?
Packers are taking on the.
They're on bye.
But just what
did you see anything this last week that you liked on that Sunday night game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a very, very electric game ending in a tie. He was able to get Golden involved. Obviously, Romeo Doubs had an enormous game. Liked seeing him just kind of, spreading the ball. Tucker Kraft owners, I don't think we have anything to be worried about there. He saw a slightly, smaller first read percentage, but I don't think that's really any point of concern. Like what I saw from the Packers after that lackluster week against the Browns, though. Yeah, I mean, they're on bye this week, so not a ton of matchup stuff to look out for or anything. But what about you?
Yeah, agreed. I think in leagues where you're needing a flex or things like that, you're going to be starting these receivers, but it's still hard to know what it's going to look like every week. Like last week, Dontavion Wicks at a 22% first read percentage. This week, he was sub 12%. So It's just hard to get a real read on things. Matthew Golden had that huge play on the first drive of the game. Outside of that, didn't get a ton of work. I mean, he caught a few more passes, but Dobbs was clearly the guy that Jordan Love looked to in any moment when he needed a chunk play.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs.
The receiver that he trusted the most. Jacobs is obviously going in your lineup every week.
Yeah,
he looks great as well. But yeah, I think if you are somebody that had some of these injuries go against you in the recent weeks, that Romeo Doubs absolutely a guy you can trust to throw in some flex spots and stuff like that going forward. I think he's proved that. So
100%.
We got the Texans here. They're taking on the Ravens, like we said. Ravens secondary is all kinds of banged up. I like Nico Collins a ton in this one. Woody Marks obviously had a huge week last week, which is their biggest takeaway. He was up over 20 fantasy points. Finally got that share of the offense that I think we've been hoping he would see at some point down the road, just based on how mid Nick Chubb has looked. And I think he's finally proven that he can be that guy a bit. So I like Nico a ton in this one. His projection, I think, was only around 12.5 fantasy points and half point. I think he could easily soar over that one against a secondary that is all kinds of banged up. I think Woody Marks could get bottled up in just a touch. I think the Ravens run D is going to have to figure it out. I think there's probably a lot of things going on in that defensive room right now, realizing they need to be better. And I think you're still probably going to start him if you dealt with injuries or he's a guy that you have and you feel good about off the waiver wire and you just need to start this week. He's fine for that. But Nico Collins is the main guy I'm locked in on this week.
Yeah, I am totally there with you. Nico Collins is my main focus for this week. Um, we just saw KC receivers kind of just thrash Baltimore. Obviously, Mahomes has looked a bit. I mean, he honestly hasn't looked a ton better than Stroud, but Stroud is not Patrick Mahomes. But receivers have just been killing the Ravens generally. Marlon Humphrey is going to likely be sitting on Sunday, which makes it even easier for Nico. Um, I think we should see potentially like top 5 numbers from Nico Collins this week. And if you're right about that 12.5 number, I am all over Nico Collins. I'm probably going to go look at some bets after
Yeah, I
this.
don't know what the line is looking like in terms of yards and stuff or on platforms, but I know I'm playing against him in sleeper this week, and he's like somewhere around that 12.5 range.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a smash.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on to the Colts. They're playing the Raiders this week. Kind of a gross game. They got the short end of the stick in that Rams game. Adonai Mitchell kind of just threw that game for them for whatever reason. Dropped the ball going into the end zone and picked up a dumb holding penalty on a crazy Jonathan Taylor, like 50-yard touchdown. So that game could have easily swung their way if some of those plays didn't happen, even if just one of them didn't happen, probably. Um, but the Raiders' run D has looked really good. You're still obviously starting Jonathan Taylor, but the run D's been good all year. Pass defense has been terrible, so you feel pretty good about taking a shot on one of these pass catchers, probably Tyler Warren or Michael Pittman. If you're really desperate, I think you could even see some huge plays out of a Josh Downs or someone like that, maybe an Alec Pierce, but that's probably only if you really have to scratch the bottom of the barrel. But I feel good about pass catchers taking a stab on them in this one, kind of a get right spot.
Yeah, I also think Daniel Jones is probably a smash in this one. He should have a fun game.
Yeah, agreed. I think you could see some rushing upside as well if he can get outside of the pocket.
Totally. Yeah, other than that, I think I just agree with you on the points you made on these Colts.
Sweet. The Jags. Travis Etienne looked fantastic yet again last week against the Niners. Did come out with a W. Their target share is kind of going to be all over the place. It's hard to trust anyone. Like if you used your second round pick on BTJ, he's going in your lineup. You feel terrible about it, but he's got to be there. You can't trade him. He's going to start because if he has a good week, you're going to feel terrible that you didn't, or that you didn't have him in your lineup. I think you're probably still starting him. Parker Washington, huge decline in production. He did have that long return touchdown, which was huge. Probably got you 6 points if you somehow threw him into your lineup after that week when he received a ton of targets in week 3. Still don't feel great if you're an owner of any of these pass catchers, probably. They
Brenton
got a fun
Strange,
matchup.
maybe. Yeah,
Yeah, Brenton Strange for sure.
concept.
They
Yeah.
have a fun matchup against the Chiefs. I think that game could get decently high scoring, and I think you're definitely starting Travis Etienne, obviously. And one of these pass catchers surely is going to have a good day. The Chiefs have given up some long plays to receivers and things like that, but just hard to kind of pinpoint which one you're going with.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Strange is a potential like good waiver wire pickup if he's available on waivers. Also can start him probably this week, in my opinion, against this Chiefs team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but otherwise, would agree. It's kind of hard to nail down like which pass catcher, if any, you would go with on this team quite yet, just because BTJ has been so muted as far as what his expectations were. Um, so yeah, probably just staying away from these guys largely this week. ETN is probably gonna get a lot of touches and everything. But
I'm with you there. Chiefs. We got a back-to-back matchup there. We got the Jags. Now we got the Chiefs. They're playing on Monday night, I believe.
Yeah.
Should be a fun game, as we said. Xavier Worthy, I was impressed with how much he was involved in the offense after that layoff with the injury in week 1. You're starting him in your lineups. The Jags' pass defense has been really good the last few weeks, so probably feel less good about him this week than you did against that Ravens defense that struggled all year. But he's still going in your lineups. It's probably a solid little flex play. Outside of that, Mahomes, I think, should have a big week. It's hard to kind of get too cute with these pass catchers, really. It's hard to know exactly who's going to receive those touchdown looks or end zone looks and targets and target share and all that, but don't feel good about any of the running backs really. Again, it feels like Brashard Smith's role is increasing a tad. But yeah, I think you're starting Xavier Worthy, absolutely starting Mahomes, and if you have Kelsey and not another tight end, you can throw him in there, but just not the greatest.
Yep, I'd agree. You're starting Xavier Worthy, and I think you're pretty confidently starting Xavier Worthy, honestly, in my opinion. Last week, got 2 end zone targets. I think just generally his production has been pretty good. Like, as far as targets per game goes, he is the wide receiver 9 in the league so far. Um, as far as fantasy points goes, he's up there. So I think Xavier Worthy is definitely still a very valid starter as long as Rashee Rice is out, but who I think is probably going to outscore him when he returns eventually. But Mahomes seems to be looking downfield, a bit more than he was last season. That is going to boost the fantasy utility of all these pass catchers on the Chiefs. So I like Xavier this week.
The Rams. Tomorrow night showdown, divisional matchup against the Niners. Niners have all kinds of injuries. I think the Rams should walk through them somewhat easily. Obviously, depends on whether Purdy plays or if Pearsall plays or any of the above. But Puka, just should be posed for yet another gigantic week. Probably the biggest regret from fantasy owners is I think he should have been a top 3 pick. Stafford's just been absolutely feeding the ball. He's on pace to break a ton of records. Easily my wide receiver 1 rest of year. I don't think it's even particularly close. He's just been that guy as of late. Kyron Williams feel decent about. Travis Etienne was able to run over the Niners last week, but I think the real advantage here is just going to be starting Devontae and Puka. No real competition for a third guy in terms of targets. Those two guys are pretty much able to get whatever they want. And with the Niners really struggling with the pass rush with Nick Bosa out for the season, I think you can comfortably drop back even with a less mobile Matt Stafford and count on your O-line to protect really well and just kind of take your shots downfield. Those 3 guys instantly go into your lineup. Outside of that, nobody relevant.
Yep, totally agree. I think they're must starts. Devontae Adams, obviously not seeing the same read percentage as Puka is week over week, but he's seeing a ton of end zone targets, averaging like 15.5 fantasy points a game. Obviously, one of the best QB pairings you could possibly have as far as fantasy production goes, and that should only, get stronger and stronger, that pairing. So
Yeah, all you
smash,
need is a couple end zone targets.
yeah, smash week for these guys.
Charges. Amarian Hampton was everything that people thought he could be and more last week. Last 2 weeks, he's been over 20 fantasy points. Seems like he'll just be an absolute workhorse going forward. Is going to dominate snaps. He's been great in pass pro, even catching passes. Scored a touchdown on that 54-yard run last week. Couldn't have any more confidence in him going into a matchup against the Commanders. Secondary struggled. I think Hampton should get open for some passes. Obviously, you're starting him. He's going to be one of the higher projected running backs in the league this week. And then in terms of other players, I like pretty much all these pass catchers. You feel decent starting any of them. Ladd, you're obviously very frustrated with his performance if you used your late 2, early 3 on him this year. It's not gone according to plan, but if you picked up QJ on waivers or you drafted him in a deeper league or something, you're starting him this week, absolutely. Even feel decent if you have Keenan. Keenan might be a guy you're trading off of now. I don't see this being the most sustainable role in the world, but I'm starting all these guys.
Yeah, it would probably just second what you said. Like Ladd McConkey, I think if you don't have Ladd from a fantasy perspective, it's a great buy low spot to try to get in on him, just because we've seen so much production from these kind of what we would otherwise consider secondary guys in Keenan Allen and QJ. So I think that Ladd role should just increase, sort of revert back to the mean as the season progresses, just based on how he looked last season. But yeah, other than that, I think I would just second what you said. Keenan, little bit, yeah, I totally agree that you should just be trading off of him probably at this point. Maybe wait for one more boom week from him here.
Absolutely. The Raiders. Genty finally broke out. That's huge. You probably
Yeah.
used your first round pick on him or something. This was exactly the week you had in mind. Caught 2 touchdowns, ran a 60-yarder in. I think his role in the passing game is only going to increase as well. He should be a guy you can trust in that realm as well. Hopefully, they found some schemed looks that they like that they can use against a better run D. The Bears are not good in that category at all. Colts are decent at it. So we'll see how that carries over, but he's obviously going to your lineup. Brock struggled yet again, scammed some fantasy points towards the end of that one, PPR wise, but not a great week. Hasn't really lived up to the hype at all this season, but I think he's still kind of been dealing with an injury and just hasn't really been himself. I expect that to kind of get better as the season goes on. Trey Tucker's always me a guy you're throwing in. If you are desperate and just need kind of like a boomer bust guy, he's the definition of that. He's either going to catch 40-yard passes and find his way in the end zone, or he's going to have weeks like last week when he really struggled. So be warned, he's that guy if you want to take some kind of crazy upside swing. But outside of that, Jacoby has always been a very high floor guy. Was not that this week for you, which is disappointing because I think that was a matchup a lot of people targeted and liked a lot for him, but I think he should be able to pick it up a bit against his Colts secondary that just gave up like 50 fantasy points to receivers last week. So someone's going to have to eat. I think Jacoby's clearly the first read of the receivers. So feel decent about starting these guys this week in what could be a fun game.
Yeah, I trust you on the Raiders breakdown. Do you know what I just learned was that Dante Thornton is from Baltimore?
Really?
Yeah.
That's not shocking.
Yeah, he's from Cherry Hill, which is like super ghetto neighborhood. His
Yeah, I
mom,
mean, I think he's a dynasty guy you can probably stash and stuff. He's going to see some deep targets and stuff like that. But I think there was a lot of buzz about him in camp, and he just hasn't lived up to that quite yet.
Yeah.
But moving on, we got your Dolphins. Take it away.
Yeah, finally got our first win of the season against a very formidable foe, the Jets. And yeah, we pretty
another
much,
one this week in the Panthers.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna get like these are the exact type of games that make you think like, oh, maybe like I mean Tyreek is obviously
We're so
injured
back.
and the season's ruined. It's like, yeah, we're so back. It's like we got 2 wins in a row against the Jets and the Panthers, like, but it's not gonna be like that, especially not with Tua or with Tyreek's injury. That absolutely sucks. I mean, that obviously from just like a production standpoint, that opens things up for Malik Washington. He's a player to look at with Tyreek Hill out. Obviously, was fun to see Darren Waller score 2 touchdowns in his first game in multiple years. So will be interesting to see if he can keep that up. I think, if you're kind of strung out at tight end, he's a decent pickup right now. Obviously, got those 2 touchdowns. Who knows? Could see a lot more targets from Tua now that Tyreek is out. Malik Washington, I think, is a great deep ad right now. Panthers defense, nothing to write home about. So I think you could kind of get funky with like the Malik Washington, the Darren Waller plays again this week. HN should see another exceptional week. I mean, Tyreek Hill is out. He's going to see even more passing volume probably than what was his already ridiculous passing volume as a running back beforehand. Obviously, still trust his ability. He should be perfectly fine. Your team's staple running back for the rest of the season, but tough for the Dolphins. I think they get this win here. I think it should be a pretty high scoring game, honestly, or at least an exciting game. So, yeah, definitely going to be looking at pieces in this one.
Yeah, we talked about the upside with Bryce Young and those guys. I think this is like a really defining stretch of games for Jalen Waddle here to see what his career is going to look like, because this seemed like it was going to be the last year of Tyreek, regardless of injury or anything. And now with that, he's going to have kind of an earlier shot at that. And excited to see what it brings. I think Darren Waller is also could be somewhat relevant. We have to see what like a full game with no Tyreek looks like, but I think it's a really intriguing spot for Jalen Waddle. Should dominate targets, and hopefully we see him return to the form of him in his rookie year with no Tyreek when he was fantastic. And I would be pretty excited if you had him in like dynasty formats and stuff. I think he could be a really fun kind of cornerstone of the offense, but it's all up to him to kind of, he's got the opportunity now. It's up to him to take it and see what he does with it.
Dude, I kind of want a Darren Waller jersey.
Rocket.
If he scores another touchdown this week, I'll seriously.
We're bumping nothing but Darren Waller
Yeah.
in the car.
Love it.
We got the Vikings. We touched on that early morning game. It's going to be in London against the Browns. Jordan Addison was quick to hit the field running. Looked great. Had 4 catches for over 100 yards. Looked like he probably hadn't been hitting as many sprints in practice and in training as you might have hoped, because he did get hawked down on that long touchdown, which is never something you would think with a guy like Jordan Addison who has that burst of speed. But I think he'll improve as the year goes on. But it was nice to see him involved in the offense in a week when it seemed like it might take a sec for him to get fully involved. But I was really impressed. Carson Wentz was able to sustain 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers, which is sick. Justin Jefferson, best game of the year. 10 catches for like 110 yards, I believe, which is elite. Jordan Mason, I think, should have a long day for him against this Browns defense, but he's able to kind of get enough volume where if he finds his way into the end zone, he'll still be fantasy relevant. You're still starting him. Browns defense in terms of the secondary is good, but they are susceptible to some big plays every now and then, which would lead me to think Jordan Addison can be a fun little spike play or a guy to take a longest reception or something like that on. So keep an eye on that.
Are we starting Addison in our shared roster this week, Grant?
We might as well.
Yeah.
I think we're starting 2 Chargers right now, so maybe we take a spot on one of those. Wells offered us a fun trade, which we can discuss later. But
didn't he offer us like Kenneth Walker?
Walker for RJ Harvey. He's an RJ Glazer, so it's hard to turn that one down. I feel like he might be overpaying with some of his bias towards him, but
okay, we'll discuss.
We shall see.
Okay.
The Pats taking on the Bills on Sunday night should be a high-scoring game. I expect Drake May to throw the ball a ton in this one, just based off the game script and stuff. So Hunter Henry, you're starting. Stephon Diggs, even if you're in deeper leagues, you liked a lot what you saw out of him in Week 4, so you're starting him probably as well. Everyone else pass-catching-wise is a rather not for me. Running backs, Trayvon Henderson did get a goal line run, which was nice to see, but the role didn't quite ramp up the way I think a lot of people thought it was going to after those fumble problems in Week 3. So I'm staying away from all those dudes unless you're desperate for a flex. I think Trayvon's probably the highest upside, but staying away from him, starting Diggs and Hunter Henry in a high game script.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd say if you're desperate, maybe even Booty. But other than that,
maybe.
I agree with you.
Everybody eats in this one, maybe.
Yeah.
I guess we will see. But moving swiftly onwards to the Saints. Everybody loves some New Orleans Saints action. Taking on the Giants, whose secondary has been a tad shaky. I think this game should be pretty low scoring, but it's also potential for 2 guys who, I mean, I think Spencer Rattler's honestly looked pretty good so far this year. Just the team is not worthy of contention by any means. And I was impressed with Jackson Dart. Didn't look great throwing the ball, and obviously you lose Malik Neighbors. That's not going to help. But I think this game could be somewhat high scoring, and you're obviously starting Chris Olave, should get a ton of targets. Rashid Shaheed, if you're in super deep formats, could be a fun upside swing. And I kind of like Rattler in this one. I mean, if you're super flex and you're desperate, you had Lamar maybe or something, throw in Spencer Rattler for this week, maybe see what he's got. But yeah, Olave feels like a great play.
Yeah, I mean, Olave is an absolute must start this week, I think. The matchup is perfect. I mean, I think he's pretty much a lock to finish top 20 this week, honestly. That is pretty much what I would add there. Yeah, I think the expectations of Rattler have been exceeded. Just an insane amount of targets to Olave, which you love to see. And he can maintain that while also like giving his other receivers a decent first read share, or at least the primary receiver. So look for them to throw it a bunch this game, and I think there should be a really good game from Olave.
Completely agree. The Giants,
Los
Malik
Gigantes.
Neighbors, rest in
Yeah.
peace. Out for the year. Nobody else really had a ton of success with Jackson Dart in this one. Ground game seems to be pretty formidable. Jackson Dart's willing to kind of put his body on the line, put his head down, and grind for some extra yards. And that is obviously Cam Scadaboo's MO, just crackhead final boss. He's going to run through your face. You're still starting Cam Scadaboo in this one against the Saints, obviously. Should be a good matchup for him yet again. And you feel decent about Dart with some rushing upside. Outside of that, I think Theo Johnson is a fun guy to keep an eye on just because big target, young QB seems to be a formula for some success. And I think they're just going to have to find ways to get Wan'Dale Robinson open. I don't love him as a player or really trust him all that much to really take over this role, but he's still a guy that you feel okay about just based on the targets he's going to get and he's going to have to get going forward. That's just kind of the reality of the situation. But yeah, you're probably throwing him in a flex and deeper formats. Theo Johnson, keep an eye on him. Running game, start him.
I'm low-key huge on starting Theo Johnson this week after that first read percentage last week and that connection with Jackson Dart. I mean, Scadaboo, him getting a little bit better, plus the rushing upside of Dart, means probably more midfield dump-off passes to the tight end. The matchup with New Orleans is really tasty. The Saints have allowed multiple touchdowns to tight ends since the beginning of this season. So I am going to go on a limb and say start your Theo Johnsons this week. Other than that, I think Wan'Dale should be a pretty good fantasy option if he's available on your waiver wires. He saw multiple red zone targets in week 4. Figures to be the best replacement option for Neighbors that Jackson Dart has. Last season also saw a surprisingly high amount of volume. And it's I don't think he's going to, from an actual, zooming out a fantasy perspective, be a suitable replacement for Neighbors. But I do think, you can start Wan'Dale Robinson certain weeks for sure. Going forward.
The Jets. Tough one against Miami. Fields looked fun on the ground, but that's about it. That's about all you got there. Had that one long play. Garrett Wilson, garbage time stat pad is always nice to see if you're a fantasy owner. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really say against this offense with this offense. They're taking on the Cowboys, which in theory should be a really good matchup for Garrett Wilson and pass catchers. Jacobs obviously had a ton of success on the ground too, so you feel decent about Breece Hall, but not an offense you really want to be too attached to, although this could be a fun week for them.
Yeah, I kind of like the over in this one. I do think you're a little bit. I mean, Breece Hall, I think is just I think he has the talent for sure. That's why I'm not too concerned personally. But it's otherwise would be a bit concerned by last week. Justin Fields, despite the loss, fun rushing upside. I think he went up 15% on PS. So he's a good buy depending on the game script here and there. Garrett Wilson should see a ton of volume this game, like you said, Grant. That's pretty much that from me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Mason Taylor also, that was a big, I guess.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah, got to keep an eye on. I don't know if you're even using a roster spot yet or putting too much interest in him, but just keep an eye there.
Yeah.
Could be a potential league winner as the season goes on. Now here in this Eagles game, they're playing the Broncos. Like we said, Broncos defense is great. It's tough to start anyone and feel elite about anyone in a spot like this against the Broncos defense. Put together their best performance of the year last week against the Bengals. Obviously, it's Bengals. Take that with a grain of salt. But Eagles pass catchers, you're never really going to feel great about it. It's going to be boom or bust. You're either going to get huge weeks out of A.J. Brown or you're going to get 3 points. This feels like a spot where Pat Surtain is going to be all over him. Don't love the pass catchers this week. This feels like a game that the Eagles probably just try to take a lead and control the pace of, and you're rocking with some big Jalen Hurts potential performances, maybe a Saquon breakout type game, a huge game for him. And Goddard has gotten a ton of reliable end zone targets. So if you need a tight end, another guy to think about.
Yeah, I'd pretty much just second what you said on everything with the Eagles.
Word. We got the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I believe are on bye,
Yeah,
traveling
they are.
back from England. DK Metcalf looked elite in that game. Was over 20 fantasy points. Kind of a fun game. Didn't get to watch much of it on the West Coast here. But watch some tape and stuff like that, and DK seemed to be getting open. Aaron Rodgers clearly trusts him as a guy he can throw a reliable deep ball to, which is fun. Kenneth Gainwell was fantastic. That role is going to be probably not the same for him as Jalen Warren will assumingly return after this bye. But that was a fun little Linsanity run for him in that game. Nothing else to touch on. No pass catchers I really loved outside of DK. And you're going to be starting Warren or Gainwell, whoever is kind of in line for the work on that given day.
And I feel like it should be Warren, and you love the receiving upside from Warren too. But Gamewell, wow, dude, did you see how much he went up on PredictionStrike?
Yeah, insane. I think he had to be the biggest gainer of the week, right?
I think he was. I actually made a post about that yesterday. Wait, let me see who actually was.
Either way, he must have been top 3. Obviously, a guy that you got a ton of gains out. And if you were just like kind of looking at props and things of that sort, like whatever you took with Kenneth Gainwell was gonna be good.
94.4.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, agree with you otherwise there. Let's move on.
Kenny Gainwell. Seahawks. Weird game last Thursday. JSN almost no or literally 0 targets in the first half of the game. And then kind of as the game went on, a ton of work from JSN and was the guy that was being targeted down the stretch whenever a big chunk play was needed, which is cool. Obviously going into your lineups every week. He's a reliable wide receiver 1 level player. Don't love Cup. Don't love Elijah Arroyo, even though he was kind of getting open in that last game, find his way in the end zone. I feel like we talked about a lot of tight ends to keep an eye on. So there are other options that I like more than Arroyo. Torrey Horton's a guy to keep an eye on in deeper leagues, roster him maybe in those formats, but I expect his role to continue to grow. And yeah, I think outside of that, you're probably still just kind of debating which of those 2 running backs to start against this Buccaneers defense. Still, Kenneth is the guy to me. You're not really going to be starting Zach Charbonnet, but in weeks where they're both playing, it eats out of both of their ceilings. So love JSN this week. Everyone else, whatever. Sam Darnold could be fun.
Yeah, I think maybe Kenneth at flex. Definitely not starting Sharp this week. Gotta start JSN. Otherwise, I agree with you. I think my outlook on Torrey Horton is a little bit more negative, or not negative, but just like I'm less like Torrey Horton's going to be a thing this season. But
that's fair. Maybe this is more dynasty brain, but I think he's like a guy whose role could grow as the season goes on, whether it leads him to fantasy relevance or not. I just think it could be a role that expands.
Yeah, I could see it.
But we are here with the Niners, who play on Thursday night tomorrow. Pearsall questionable, Jawan questionable, Kittle out, Purdy maybe out. It's hard to really rely on anyone. I don't love like any of these plays really. I'm probably staying away from most of these guys personally. McCaffrey should have just a gigantic game. I think his receiving yards line is all the way up towards 60, which makes sense. He's basically the only pass catcher that you've ever heard of that will be catching passes in this one, assuming those guys are out. Assuming one of Jawan or Pearsall plays, I think the one that plays is a smash. If both of them somehow play, feel less good about both of them just because they're going to eat each other's targets. But that's basically my read on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think the only thing I would add is, I don't know, maybe a Tongass look, but that's like still, I'm not huge on that. I'm kind of just saying that. But I do think if either Jawan or Pearsall starts, that's kind of like a must start just because Purdy throws so many deep shots. Pearsall, obviously really good, ranks really high in like yards per route run and stuff. And then Jennings in his one healthy game this year had a smash week. So yeah, I mean, look into either of those guys.
Totally with you. Bucks. They are taking on the Seahawks, who we just talked about recently. Egbuka start, obviously. Godwin, I don't know really what his game ended up looking like, but they were playing from behind most of it, so a lot of throws being made. Was on a bit of a snap count, but I think his role will probably increase as days go on. Godwin 3 catches for 26, nothing spectacular. Did get 10 targets, which is great. You feel decent about that, and he could be a guy that in deeper leagues you're kind of slowly letting ramp up his role, and once he finally gets to that point, you're capable or you feel good about starting him. Bucky Irving, weird injury, played the whole game, and then afterwards was revealed that he has a bit of a foot sprain. Is questionable this week. I would be shocked if he plays this week, even though they're saying there's a chance. I'm ruling him out right now. Rashad immediately becomes a flex play, and keep an eye on a guy like Sean Tucker, who in the past has dominated the ground game, while Rashad has been the pass catcher. Also gets some work on the ground, but Sean Tucker is a fun guy to keep an eye on if Bucky's injury ends up being a couple weeks or so.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think could be kind of a fun buy very low spot for Mike Evans, who, I mean, he has the hamstring injury. He is 32 years old at this point. But he's done this before. I mean, he's got Baker, the most aggressive quarterback in the league, like throws the most deep bombs. He's one of the best, maybe the best fantasy quarterback pairing you could have. And then Evans last year, or 2024, sorry, which is last year. Yeah, he just looked amazing after coming back from the hamstring injury that time around. So he's expected to be back. I think it could be a fun super buy low spot here.
Yeah, he might just be inevitable.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on him.
He averaged like 20
Titans.
fantasy points a game after coming back last year.
Yeah, he did. Titans, I'm benching all of them. I mean, you could still keep an eye on Ridley, keep him on your bench for now. Same with Ellick, but hard to have a ton of confidence based on that last couple weeks. Just haven't been able to get anything going offensively. Even Tony Pollard, I mean, he's probably a flex play if you drafted him to be such, but it's just kind of gross. He's going to get a ton of volume. They're probably going to get bottled up. And if your team doesn't score any touchdowns, it's hard for your running back to score any touchdowns. So this week, I'm benching all of them. Keep an eye on him as the season goes on. But yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you on everything there.
The Commanders, Terry McLaurin was kind of a late scratch there. They're playing the Chargers. Yep. Chargers run D has been pretty solid. So JCM probably a little bit of a downtrend this week. I like Debo and Zach Ertz. Debo seems to be a guy that they trust to just kind of, if they need a spark in the offense, he's a guy you can give the ball to in a handoff or a dump off or a screen, tunnel screen, anything like that to scheme him open to get him the ball. I think Terry will probably play this week. It seems to be a little bit up in the air. Haven't gotten a ton of injury reports just yet. Recording this on Wednesday. But if Terry plays, he'll still be a flex option. And if he doesn't play, I think Debo could even be a wide receiver too. But he's probably still a flex if Terry plays. Hopefully Jaden's back. He's obviously going in your lineups if he's playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much agree there.
And that is all we got. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We have another packed slate. First week of some buys here. I think we have four buys this week. So yeah, finally starting to eat at some of the amount of games we have on this Sunday. Should let you focus on some of your favorite teams or some of your favorite players just that much more. Should be a fun week. Hopefully less injuries this week, and we can see some guys stay healthy. And let's maybe see a Brian Thomas Jr. breakout. That would be fun. Let's root for that.
Boom.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you got here, Follow us on socials at PredictionStrike. Download the app. Get involved with Pick'em this week. Use some of the advice we just gave you. And stay tuned for these weekly. And peace out, y'all. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Peace.